Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today we are finally going to take a look at all of the features and deliverables that finished their work in September. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members who allow me to make these kinds of videos. Your support is truly appreciated. So a little while ago I released a video that spoke about all of the work coming to an end in the month of August, according to the progress tracker. So following on from that one, each month I would like to put together videos that take a look at all of the work that is both kicking off each month as well as ending each month, just to keep us all more informed as to what is going on in the background. Before we get to that though, just like it with the previous video, just because something on the progress tracker has work beginning or is completing doesn't mean it will necessarily be released that quarter, the next quarter, or even in that year, as there could still be a lot more work required from other teams like the downstream teams, for example audio or visual effects. All priorities can of course shift and it can get pushed back until it is needed. It is however a great guide to see what could potentially come to the PU and when, but at the very least it will show us what work is being done at what time in the year. So with that said, let us take a look at all of the features and deliverables that have work that came to an end in the month of September. So let's kick off with some pretty cool ones. The first one is a really good quality of life deliverable, which we have been needing for quite a while now. It is called vehicle-in-vehicle loadout spawning. Now this is enabling item ports and cargo grids to support vehicle loading via the VMA. So using your vehicle manager mobiGlas app, which will also allow the ASOP terminals to report vehicle-in-vehicle statuses. So the way that it's likely going to work is that you will open up your VMA on your mobiGlas, select a ship, for example the Constellation, then click on its cargo bay and select the vehicle that you would like to load inside of it. Let's say an Ursa rover. Now when you go to the ASOP terminal, which is the ship request screen at the landing zones and space stations, when you choose that particular constellation it will spawn with the Ursa already inside. And with personal inventory already in place when this feature does come, you will likely need to ensure that both vehicles are in the same location within the verse to allow it to happen. So pretty neat. Now the next feature is one that I am very excited to see come along. It is Life Support Tier 0. And this says implementing the first iteration of onboard life support systems in ships, which entails a ship component that generates air when turned on, and management of said life support component within the vehicle loadout manager. Now the work on this finished mid-September I think it was, and I do expect that the life support system will be the next system to come online, especially with the fire hazard also coming along with oxygen feeding fires. Now I really hope it will be a physical component for the first iteration, as I feel replacing oxygen tanks would be something pretty cool to do. Maybe even just hook it into the personal inventory without fully physicalizing it, allowing us to buy one and then replace the O2 tanks when we need to, just simply using the UI to start with maybe. Now I don't know exactly what the rollout plan for actual physical components are yet, but with 3.15 bringing the first part of persistence, it shouldn't be too far off. This year, pretty unlikely, but it is likely that CIG will roll out each physical component one at a time rather than all in one go. And regardless of when it does come, I love the sound of keeping your eyes on the life support system, monitoring oxygen levels, checking your O2 scrubbers and so on. A pretty important system I'd expect, ensuring that you have enough oxygen for the crew on board or using it against unwanted boarders. It will also act as a natural limitation as to why you can't just fill your spaceship with players or NPCs like a clown car, as life support systems will only be capable of maintaining the maximum crew contingent for a certain set period of time. Let us hope we hear more at CitizenCon or even on an upcoming episode of Inside Star Citizen, but seeing this system in action and soon on board our ships will be pretty cool. Now this next feature we have is the creature rigging pipeline. This feature only began work in late August and should have already been completed now, with the work only lasting 2 weeks. This is the process of developing and creating the internal rigging pipeline which will be used to create the skeleton and ultimately used by the animation team for how the various creatures will move. Now I suspect what this team is developing here will allow for a creature rig to be created easier and quicker, allowing them to get the vast array of fauna that is planned for Star Citizen developed and in-game at a reasonable speed. My guess is the Space Whale and Boreal Stalker, aka the Microtech Bear, will be the first two creatures we see in the verse, So following on from that, next we have a feature that pretty much speaks for itself, the Space Whale version 1. Now the work on this creature finished towards the end of September, and the card reads, the Space Whale is a creature from the gaseous planet Crusader and serves as a mascot for the planet and is depicted frequently in scenery around the planet and landing zones. In fact, I think I have a Finlay storm wall on the way. Now, although this doesn't say the usual creating of the creature to implement it in the game, I think it's safe to say that as the work on this involves 3 teams, being the AI content team, the AI tech features team, and the character art team, that this is much of the work to get that animal floating around the clouds of Crusader. Of course, there is still likely going to be plenty of work remaining for the downstream teams, like getting the Space Whale audio and any visual effects associated with it. But as we have seen in the concepts of the Space Whale barnacle harvesting gameplay, when they do come, it'll be a pretty incredible moment. Sticking with the AI stuff, next we have AI planetary navigation. Now this is one of the more significant deliverables, as it is the first pass at a system that will allow NPCs to be capable of moving on planet-side surfaces. This is pretty much the main reason why we are yet to see any NPCs moving around on planetary surfaces, and why once done they will be able to. But this planetary navigation doesn't just apply to NPC humans, it will apply to all manner of species from the other alien races like the Banu, the Vanduul, the Jian, and Taveran, and terrestrial animals, creatures and fauna. Now the work on this finished earlier in September, and as I say, I am hoping that this will now mean NPCs will soon be found wandering around the planetary locations, and it is one huge step to getting a dynamic population with NPCs coming and going and just getting on with their general day-to-day lives. Next on my list is a deliverable that I have been very excited for ever since we first heard about it. It is called Physical Damage and Breakability. Now this says making use of the physics engine to create a system that looks and behaves realistically when large objects such as ships are damaged by weaponry or colliding with other ships, locations or planets. Now this will be a huge feature when it comes, as it will not only mean damage will be accurately represented on the ship and be a big step towards the time to disable rather than the current time to kill, but it will also be necessary for the full potential of the salvaging mechanic to evolve. Of course, we are yet to see the hand salvaging profession, which is still slated for the end of the year. Fingers crossed that doesn't move at all, and I'm sure CIG will craft some potential wrecks for players to salvage, but long term, when players or NPCs are flying around, mistakes will be made and ships will crash or get disabled and get left behind after the crew are rescued or if they're all just dead. So these wrecks will persist for salvagers to come along and reap the rewards. It is also just so incredibly cool to have such a realistic damage system that means the meta aspect of combat will change completely and hopefully even disappear, which is CIG's intentions. Now we don't know when we will see this in action, let alone roll out to the many ships that we do have, but the work on it ended earlier last month, and if I were to guess, considering we haven't seen anything on it in the last few months, I expect to see this shown off at CitizenCon, but again that is just my opinion, not a guarantee. Now one pretty interesting feature that I noticed come to an end last month is called the Jian Facial Rig. This is the process of rigging the Jian character model for use in animations. Now there are 2 things to speak of here. Firstly, I will be very hyped to finally see the Jian in action, talking and one day moving around the verse, but also this deliverable is for both Star Citizen's Persistent Universe and Squadron 42, so there must be some form of Jian interaction within the single player campaign. Now personally, one of the moments in Star Citizen's development that I am really looking forward to is the day that we can walk around a fully populated city with many of the players and NPCs just making their way around, but not just human NPCs, Jian, Taveran and the Banu all mingling and going about their business. When that day comes, it'll be quite a moment to witness. So this next feature is one that I think anyone who is currently playing the PU can rejoice in. It is the map and radar system rework. This is one major much needed quality of life improvement, and the card says an overhaul of the underlying system and associated UI for the star map, radar, local area map and minimap. We have needed a new star map in Star Citizen for so long. The one we have right now has served its purpose. It looks cool, but damn, it's so frustrating. Not only that, this will bring a local area map and minimap two very useful new additions helping us to navigate planetside or even around landing zones or pretty much anywhere on foot. Again, no idea when we will see this new map come into the game, as it is not currently on the release view, but I can't imagine CIG will hold on to it for too long. But the sooner we get that into the PU, the better. Now next on my list we have the Male Specialist Heavy RRS Armour. We have seen the light variant of this armour set recently. In fact, anyone who is backing the game before October 9th or CitizenCon will be granted a free light RRS armour set in red. For the heavy armour set, I'm assuming it follows along with its lighter counterpart and it is intended for stealth, and I would also expect that it will have the Theta Geo feature, in which if you wear specific pieces of the same armour together, you get additional unique geometry, like the shawl we have seen on the light version. Now, not a great deal is known about RRS, but what we do know is that it stands for Rusimov Rehabilitation Systems, and that they are an Earth-based company who provide military equipment, and also the manufacturers of the Klescher prison suit. Beyond that, we don't really know anything regarding the heavy suit, other than it is a tactical suit and it kind of looks like this concept image, but I'm sure we will get more information soon. And finally, there is also some unannounced content from the narrative team. No idea what this could be. It could be related to maybe the dynamic events or something else. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So those are the most hyped features and deliverables with work that finished in September. There is a lot more work that also finished last month, but instead of delving into these as I did with the previous deliverables, I'll go through them a little quicker, otherwise the video will just be hours long. So kicking off with AI, there is a ton of work from the AI teams to develop more behaviours for NPCs. We have off-duty activities like sleeping, leisure activities like relaxing, having fun, using items available to them, jogging, watching TV and more. Medical behaviours, which we should see in Alpha 3.15 with doctors and nurses looking like they know what they're doing and patients coming in for treatments. Untrained combat AI, to have the civilian NPCs reacting to battle scenarios, finding weapons to use to defend themselves and trying to preserve their lives. NPC security officer behaviours, plus the illegal goods dealer who will buy and sell illegal products and is found wandering around the shadowy areas of the verse avoiding security. Now, much of this will initially be required for Squadron 42, but CIG will of course implement the same behaviours into the NPCs in the PU. Now, one feature that I found quite interesting is the animatable gunner helmet, which is the creation of an EVA capable version of the gunner helmet. Now, not entirely certain what that means, but I do love that CIG will be creating helmets for all the specific purposes and jobs in the verse, each with strengths and weaknesses in various areas to aid in many professions, and I assume it probably starts with this gunner helmet for Squadron 42, I suspect, but it will obviously expand over time to all other areas and the PU. Now, as we have seen over the last couple of Inside Star Citizen episodes, the laser trip mines have made great progress, and both the laser trip mines and proximity mines work came to a close last month. There could still be work left to do from visual effects, audio and so on and so forth, but the initial work is done, so it won't be too long until we start seeing these initially found around derelicts, creating a bit more danger to those locations if you're wanting to loot them or take the cargo, but hopefully one day soon we can buy them and deploy them ourselves. Physicalizing quantum travel movement should have come to a close now as well, which says performing the quantum travel movement within the physics, along with efficient empty space checks along the quantum travel path to determine when to drop out of quantum travel if a potential intersection might occur. Now, this should open up quite a lot of potential for maybe even how players will encounter probability volumes and whether we want to drop out of quantum travel to engage in the various potential encounters, but it could also play a little into the exploration side of things. I'm not too sure about what direction CIG will take for exploration, as the last we heard, blind quantum travel is now possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be used that way, as deep space exploration will be using probes. We will see if they have a good way to use it, or if it is just to stop us from flying into things on our path. Either way, I would love to learn more about that. Now, one deliverable which I'm actually very excited to see is called Frontier Clothing. This involves generating concepts for Frontier-style clothing for players and NPCs, and as you can imagine, the Frontier is referring to places like Pyro, on the edge of the Empire. So I suspect it'll be a bit of a Wild West aesthetic, but it could obviously go in a completely different direction depending on the artists and what the needs are. Now, I do personally love the general frontier style, like in Firefly, for example, but what CIG design is yet to be properly seen. So I am looking forward to their take on this and how it will fit within the lore and the locations, and it may even become my overall go-to style. So there's quite a few Squadron 42 specific deliverables that were finished off in September. These are the female player head, which involves completing a modeling and texture polish for the female player head, which will then be sent off to the tech animation for a rigging pass. And I expect it's quite an important one to get done for anyone who wants to use the female character, and it will need to be brought up to the same level of standards as the male head for the main campaign. Odin 1's former moon, known as Gaini, which drifts near the remnants of the planet, looks like it's had the finishing touches from the Squadron 42 art team in September. We saw this moon up close in the vertical slice as the player made their way down to that decommissioned Chemline Solutions site where the slavers were operating. I would love to see how this looks now compared to that vertical slice version. I bet it's night and day different. Mop and Bucket is another Squadron 42 feature that enables AI janitors to use multiple tools in either hand. Again, I'm sure this will eventually make its way into the PU, but for Squadron 42, we know of an Idris janitor. I think it's Beluga. He is one character in Squadron 42. Anyway, he needs to be able to do his job, and hopefully when it does come to the PU, we can assign janitorial tasks to the more disobedient members of the org. Finally, for Squadron 42, we have character work, which is the creation and implementation of various characters in Squadron, which includes art, animation, and AI behaviors. This looks to be quite the undertaking, as there were 7 different teams working on this throughout its 28 weeks work. It should be quite different visually from what we have seen in any Squadron 42 footage in the past, with improved characters all round. Here's hoping that we do see something Squadron at this year's CitizenCon, but as yet, there is no word of any Squadron 42 information. Now, this next lot are all technical deliverables for tools, optimizations, core tech, and back-end work. I will touch upon each very briefly and try to give a little context as to what each is, but many of them I don't even know what they are for. But considering there are 14 individual tech deliverables, it really shows how CIG have been knuckling down and completing a lot of this important stuff. The first few, I believe, are all related to and needed for server meshing, and let us start with the hybrid service. This says it moves the network code's replication layer out of the dedicated game server, or DGS, and into a standalone service. This service is referred to as the hybrid, as later versions of server meshing will split into component services handling different aspects of the replication layer's functionality. Now, the first version of server meshing will use this hybrid service to manage client and server streaming, replication of network state between client and servers, and persisting state changes to the entity graph. Next is the dedicated server mesh node, which implements multiple dedicated game servers and clients connected to the same instance of the hybrid service, and allows dedicated game servers to exchange entities and authority over them. Another piece of important tech is the inventory unstow. This says unstow refers to fetching an item from an inventory and placing it into a shard. For example, a ship loaded with cargo being unstowed removes the ship and its associated cargo from the inventory and places them into the game. This work implements moving an item's persistent data from an inventory into a shard managed by the entity graph and adding the item to the replication layer. So I think a lot of this is about handling the different entities and clients and whatnot as they move from one shard to the next shard, making sure that all the data and the information stored in the entity graph is also shared across them all as well. The replication layer entity authority moves the code that handles assigning and enforcing entity authority to the replication layer. And finally, the shard manager will add the functionality to the hybrid that will become the shard manager component service. Now, the shard manager's functionality is responsible for creating a shard in the entity graph database, ensuring it is seeded with an initial population of entities, communicating with matchmaking so that players can join a shard, and talking to provisioning services so that the hybrid and dedicated game servers can be assigned to the shard. Whew. So a lot of server meshing work that has now been completed. So to finish with, we have a few other bits of tech and tools and whatnot that have been created. Kicking off with something a little bit more self-explanatory is the new building blocks editor. This is purely just a new editor for the building blocks tool, which enables all developers and designers to create their own UI without having to rely on the UI team, who were just overwhelmed with so much work. This increases productivity for both the UI artists and designers and will include various tools to make visual layouts and animations more easily. The introduction of building blocks was a big step into speeding up the implementation of many features, and as we have seen, there is some pretty cool UIs coming, so any improvements here is only going to speed this up and make it a lot easier. From the tools team, we have the Cloud Test Launcher 4.0. Now, this is nothing to do with actual planetary clouds. This is added support for additional test environments, Fleet API, and fine-grained user authorization. The tech animation team have FS Tech Anim Asset Integration, which says game dev integration of .skin and .nda files with additional level of detail optimizations and fixes. This sounds like character stuff with skin and DNA, so not exactly sure what it does or whether it's that simple, but again, optimizations, fixes, definitely two words I do like in Star Citizen's development. Next, we have improved object container workflow. These are quality of life and workflow improvements to object container handling within the editor, so improving the existing tools. From here, we have something called Test Runner Improvements, and Test Runner provides a standard setup for configuration files, build folder, and data collection, and these tasks will improve reporting to allow easier analysis of results, along with continuing work on feature testing support. One feature from the persistent tech team is called Item Port Mod API, and this is an API that allows tools like the VMA to modify ship loadouts inside inventories. To me, this sounds like a step to getting physical components on ships and allowing players to swap them out, similar to our characters inventory. And just like the characters inventory, I would assume it's going to be swapping components out using the inventory system before we can physically remove a component. But this could be to allow us to change our ship's loadout based on what components and weapons that we have available at each location. I don't think we are seeing this in 3.15, although it may be. I just don't know, I'm afraid. From the AI tech team, we have the Subsumption Editor integration, which is recreating the Subsumption Editor's functionality inside the engine to allow easier setup and debugging subsumption logic for designers. So Subsumption is the system that drives the AI to behave in appropriate ways and practically live in the world instead of just being static until the player arrives. This tech sounds like it improves the overall use of the Subsumption Editor to make it all easier and quicker. And finally, the last piece of tech which finished work in September is from the persistent tech team, and it is called Freeform Variable API, and is the Blackboard service for game code systems to write generic persistent variables. So no idea what this actually does, but it does sound important. So that is all of the work that came to a close last month in September, according to the progress tracker. It was a crazy month for getting some very important features and tech completed, and I am certain much of what is now completed for server meshing will be shown off at CitizenCon this year. Very, very excited to see that. It is great seeing so much progress in very important areas, and I am looking forward to seeing much of this begin to make its way into the game. But with that said, apologies for such a long video. October doesn't seem to be as impressive, although there are some cool things coming. But if you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Also, if you would like to talk more about Star Citizen or just relax and chill out with myself and my community, you are all more than welcome over at twitch.tv/supermacbrothers. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, as it does do the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified anytime my videos go live. Again, huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Cannot do this without you guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.